Astrid Ag, survivor of the 1915 Armenian genocide. Shoje Ahmadavne, Iranian soldier in 1984. Robert A. Algarati, communications manager at Boeing Autonetics and Missile Systems Division. To Dr. Jawad Al-Ali, children's doctor in Basra. Dorothy Anderson, for pointing out Lord Roberts' 1905 remarks on Afghanistan. Nimir Aoun, wounded survivor of the 1948 Palestinian disposition. The late Yasser Arafat, chairman of the Palestinian Authority. Hanan Ashrawi of the Palestinian Authority. Tim Austin, former chief foreign sub-editor of The Times. The late Shapur Bakhtiar, the Shah of Iran's last prime minister. Peter Balakian of Colgate University. Siddiq Barmak, Afghan filmmaker. Dr. Anthony Barter, for his father's letters on Iraq and the Armenians in the 1914 to 1918 war. The Zawe Benamadi, of Algeri Actualite. Zaka Berberian, Armenian Holocaust survivor. Shamim Bhatia, Mohammed Buyali, brother of guerrilla leader Mustafa Buyali. Lakhdar Brahimi, Ross Campbell, for transcripts of the Scotsman reports on the end of the British Palestine Mandate. Pierre Caquet, Lieutenant Sandy Kavanagh, 3rd Battalion, the Parachute Regiment in 1956. Mustafa Sarik, the Imam of Bosnia. Ellen Sarkeesian Chestnut, for her memories of her Armenian father. Conor O'Clery of the Irish Times. Tony Clifton of Newsweek. Patrick Cockburn of The Independent. Warrant Officer Tim Quarren, Chinook pilot in Kurdistan in 1991. The late Fred Cooney, U.S. aid official. Janik Dami of the ICRC in Kuwait in 1991. Norman Davies, for his analysis of Hitler's references to the Armenian Holocaust. Dr. John Dick Horsey, Ireland, for his memory of Armenian orphans. Dr. Nadim Dimeshki, former Lebanese diplomat. Leonard Doyle, foreign editor of The Independent. Iman Dunphy of Irish Radio. Ian R. Edgar of Durham University. Judge David A. O. Edward, for his copy of the 1922 James Bryce Lecture on the Great War, and A. O. Edward, for his copy of the 1922 James Bryce Lecture on the Great War and Armenia. Isabel Elson, Saeb Erekat of the Palestinian Authority. Jean Farchath. Bill and Peggy Fisk, my late parents. U.S. Major General J. Garner, commander of U.S. forces in Kurdistan in 1991. Samir Gattas, current Associated Press bureau chief in Beirut. Bassam and Sania Gossain, whose daughter was killed in the 1986 U.S. bombing of Iraq. Dr. Stephen Goldby, for Foreign Office correspondence on UN sanctions. Terry Gordy of Boeing Defense and Space Group, Autonetics and Missile Systems Division. Ben Greenberger, Jewish settler on the West Bank. Dr. Selma Haddad, children's doctor in Baghdad. Dennis Halliday, head of the UN Oil for Food Program. 1997. Maulana Sami El-Haq of the Al-Haq Madrasa in Pakistan. Amira Haas of Haaretz, the late Margaret Hassan of CARE in Iraq. Dr. Mercy Heedle, Philippe Heffink of UNICEF, Baghdad in 1997. Mohammed Hakel, Egyptian journalist and author. Gavin Hewitt of the BBC. Sue Hickey, formerly of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. London, in London. Nazar Hindawi for his unconvincing attempt to explain why he gave his pregnant girlfriend a bomb to take on an El Al flight. Marjorie Housepian, Shafiq Al-Hout and his wife Bayan. Justin Hugler of The Independent. John Hurst, Vice President of the Lockheed Martin. The late King Hussein of Jordan. Aliyah Al-Husseini, granddaughter of Hajj Al-Husseini. The former Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Nadine El Isa for his copy of the Pace and Martin Palestine police report, also thanks to Peter Metcalf. Abbas Ajiha, who lost many of his family in the Israeli helicopter attack in Lebanon in 1996. Mikhail Kalashnikov, inventor of the Soviet AK-47 rifle. Myreni Kalustian, survivor of the 1915 Armenian massacres. The late Wasef Kamal, former assistant to Haj Amin in Nazi Germany. Al-Qami, Lockheed's director of communications in 1997. Marwan Kanafani of the Palestinian Authority. Kevork Karaboy Ajan, director of the Beirut Armenian Old People's Home. Victoria Karakashian, survivor of the Armenian exodus from Alexandretta. Jamal Khashoggi, assistant to the Saudi ambassador in London. Harushin Kebejian, Armenian genocide survivor. Andrew Kevorkian for his unstinting help in tracing Armenian genocide information, and his late brother Aram for memories of his visit to his ancestral home in Turkey. Zainab Kazim for her letter on Shi'ism. Sheikh Juad Medhi Al-Khalasi for his historical help on British rule in Iraq. Helen Kinsella, former foreign manager of The Independent, for her indefatigable research. Zaina Khoury of the Associated Press. Joseph Kleinman, Auschwitz survivor. Jerry LaBelle of AP. The late Professor Yeshayahu Leibowitz. George Lewinsky, formerly of CBC, London. Mikhail Linval, former UNIFIL officer in southern Lebanon. Dr. David Lowenstein of the University of Wisconsin. Madison. Mrs. Hilda Maddock for details of her father, Private Charles Dickens, in 1917. Dr. Grace Magnier of the Department of Hispanic Studies, Trinity College, Dublin, for her work on Andalusia. The late Ali Mahmoud, Bahrain Bureau Chief of the Associated Press. General Mansour, Commander of Syrian Military Intelligence in Qamishli. Laura Marlowe of the Irish Times. Nabila Meghali, formerly of the Associated Press in Bahrain. Alf Mendez. Gerard Mertens, German arms dealer. Peter Metcalf. Abderrahman Mezian Sharif, former Algerian Minister of Interior. Tufik and Philippa Mishlai of Middle East Reporter in Beirut. The late General retired Mohammed Abdul Munaim of Al Aram. Judy Morgan of CARE in Iraq. Harvey Morris of Reuters, The Independent, and now the Financial Times. Fathi Daoud Mufak, Iraqi military cameraman in the Iran-Iraq War. Major Mustafa Murad of the Egyptian Army in 1956. Anis Nakash for his memories of the Iranian Revolution and his wife. Batul for her translations of Iranian war poetry. Haj Mohammed Nasir, father of a Palestinian suicide bomber from Jenin. Syed Hassan Nasrallah, chairman of the Lebanese Hezbollah, Suhail Nator of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Ghulam Nichols for drawing my attention to Lloyd George's 1936 speech on Palestine, Nawaf Obaid, whose Harvard thesis on the goals of Saudi Wahhabists was so valuable, Mohammed Maran Othman, blinded Egyptian guerrilla fighter in 1956, the late Spraoui Papazian, Armenian genocide survivor, filmmaker, Nelofer Pazira, the late Dr. Abdul Aziz Rantisi of Hamas, my colleague Phil Reeves of The Independent and now of National Public Radio, Robbie Walter Rothschild for his encyclopedic knowledge of Lebanese railways, Martin Rubenstein, who drew my attention to a reference on the Armenian genocide in The Road to Endor, Mujtaba Safavi, former Iranian prisoner of war, Haidar al-Safi in Baghdad, the late and brilliant Palestinian scholar Edward Said, and his authoress sister, Jean Makdisi, for her help and suggestions over many years, Mohammed Salam, former Associated Press Bureau Chief in Baghdad, Dr. Kamal Salibi, formerly Director of the Institute of Interfaith Studies in Amman, Mohammed Salman, former Syrian Minister of Information, Farouk al-Shara, Syrian former minister, Abdul Hadi Sayah, the friend of Mustafa Bouyali, Martin Scannell, for permission to quote from Kenneth Whitehead's Iraq the Irredeemable, Irremediable. Clive Semple, Dr. Hussein Shahristani, Saddam Hussein's senior nuclear advisor, Don Sheridan, Private Andrew Shoemaker of the U.S. 24th Mechanized Infantry Division in the 1991 Gulf War, the Israeli historian Avi Shlaim, Amira El-Sol, Hans von Sponeck, Halliday's UN successor in the Humanitarian Office in Baghdad in 1999, Eva Stern of New York for her indefatigable search for the truth about the Sabra and Shatila massacre, Virginie Svazlian for her copy of Armenian Holocaust survivors' songs, Mater Mohammed Tari, Algerian human rights lawyer, Monsignor Henry Tessier, Archbishop of Algiers, Alex Thompson of ITV, Dr. Hassan Torabi in Khartoum, Derek Turnbull of Vickers, Karsten Tvedt of Norwegian Radio, Christopher J. Walker for his knowledge of all things Armenian, Jihad Al-Wazir, Gary Williamson of the Boeing Defense and Space Group, the late Christopher Monty Woodhouse, former SOE agent in Greece and British agent in Iran, and Dedi Zucker, Israeli Knesset MP. My thanks must go to Simon Kellner, the editor of The Independent, who encouraged me to write this book between assignments in Iraq and Lebanon, and who turned an editor's blind eye towards my prolonged absences from the paper, and for allowing me to quote from my own dispatches to the paper over 16 years, and to the Times of London, for whom I worked as Middle East correspondent from 1976 until 1988, to the Irish Times, to the London Review of Books, and to the Nation in New York, for allowing me to quote from articles of mine which appeared in their pages, to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporations in Toronto for my recordings from the 1980 Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and from the Iran-Iraq War, to the Controller of Her Majesty's Stationery Office for British government documents in the National Archives, Kew. Especially I must thank Louis Haynes, my editor at Fourth Estate, for her superhuman patience in nurturing this book for an astonishing 16 years, and Steve Cox, the most indefatigable copy editor in the world. Lastly, my appreciation goes to Dr. Victoria Fontan who wrote the chronology, formatted the bibliography, and with superhuman patience archived 328,000 of my documents, notes, and dispatches. Inevitably, there are many to whom I owe my thanks, but who cannot be named for their own security, subject to potential threat both from their enemies and from their own governments. They include members serving and retired of the armed forces of Egypt, France, Iran, Iraq, including the former second-in-command of the Air Force and 2 of his pilots, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And of course, I add the usual author's caveat: none of the above is responsible for any errors or views expressed in the Great War for Civilization.